If you clicked on this video, I'm assuming it's because you're interested in investing. You've heard the term again and again, but no one ever stops to explain it to you. I mean, do you need to be rich to invest? Can you buy a Nike stock by just walking into the Nike store?
I'll have to ask my accountant about that.
These are the questions that aren't ever answered. And that's why I'm making this video, to take you from someone with zero experience to someone who can actually go out and buy their first stock by the end of the video. No fancy investment terms, no complicated methods. This is, simply put, a video I'd wish I'd seen 3 years ago when I started my investment journey. So here you go. The first question that I naturally asked myself was, why would I even invest? Now, it's actually easier to start this by answering the reasons as to why you should not invest. The first question that I naturally asked myself was, why would I not invest? Investing is not a get-rich-quick scheme. Instead, it's all about building wealth over a long period of time. Now, the next reason why you might invest is because of something you might have heard called inflation, or in other terms, things getting more expensive over time. Inflation, on average in the UK, sits at around the 2% level, and the best way that I'm going to explain it to you is with the classic Freddo bar. Now, if you've never heard of the Freddo bar, it's a small chocolate shaped like a frog, based here in the UK, and back 20 years ago, it would have cost you 10p to buy it in a shop. Fast forward to today, it's 25p. That's an 150% rise in its price in the space of 20 years. So now you're probably thinking, well, how can I make my money at least keep up with inflation so it doesn't lose value? The problem with that is most saving accounts that give you a specific rate of return, like a 1% interest or something like that, normally sit below the inflation level. So even though your money's growing in those accounts, it's still losing value compared to the rate that inflation is going up at. Imagine if we could find somewhere that not only matched the inflation level, but could potentially exceed it and grow the value of your money faster than the actual value of what things are costing. For example, let's say the interest rate was 2% and you found somewhere that could grow your money at 10% per year. That means if you stuck away 100 quid, after 1 year you'd have 110, after 2 years you'd have 10% on top of that, which is 121, and after 10 years you would have £259 in that account from having not touched. Where if something had cost £100 10 years ago, 10 years later with that 2% inflation rate, it would now cost £121. Sounds great, right? But the next question you should be asking is, well, how does investing actually grow my money? The best place to start answering that question is to look at what the stock market is. In its most simple terms, it's buying a piece of a company. For example, let's say you're like me and you're a massive Apple fanboy and you want to buy a share of Apple. So how would that earn you money? Well, there are two ways. Number one is the value of your stock increases over time. And this is actually something that's happened historically. If we take a look at Apple stock, all you would need to do in simple terms would be buy at a lower price, let's say back in 2010 when it was $8 a share. And if you then go and sell it today at $141 a share, you've made yourself over $130 in profit. The second way you could earn money is through something called dividends. And this is where a company is really happy, they're pleased with their results, and every quarter, year, they will split a certain amount of money through all of their shareholders, depending on how many shares you have. For example, if there were 100 shareholders, you held one of the shares and they wanted to give out $100 worth of dividends, you would just get an extra dollar given to you. And off the back of that, you're thinking, okay, great, but am I even old enough to buy a stock? How much money do I need in the first place? Where do I even go to buy it? And we will get to all of those questions, I promise. But let's next go to how do you find the right stock to buy in the first place? If you're expecting me to go into a magic hat and pull out a magic stock that would make you loads of money, you might be very disappointed by this video. And the reason for that is because investing in just one stock is extremely risky. You leave yourself open to the possibility that that company just disappears off the face of the planet and voila, your money's gone. And you might be thinking on the other hand that these are companies like Apple and Microsoft you're interested, they're not going anywhere. And you would be right, but the other thing to consider is that just because companies have performed well historically does not guarantee that they're going to continue to perform well in the future. So by betting on just one company, it's like putting all your money on red. Who knows what's going to happen? Which is why as a beginner, I have always leaned towards buying large baskets of stocks filled with loads of different companies inside of them, called index funds that track markets like the S&P 500. But don't just take my word for it.
Well, the trick is not to pick the right company, it's to be, because most people aren't equipped to do that, and plenty of times I make mistakes on that. The trick is to essentially buy all the big companies through the S&P 500.
Now, I did promise you no complicated terms. I'm going to stick to that promise. So let's actually explain what an index fund is. In essence, it's a basket of stocks set to track and follow a market's performance. You might have heard of places like the FTSE 250 or the Nasdaq. or the most famous of the lot, the S&P 500, which simply translates as the top 500 performing companies in the USA. And let me actually dive in to show you what that looks like. You can kind of see companies like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon are going to sit right at the top of that. And you got 500 of the biggest firms in the US. You can see there's a whole bunch of companies that you would recognize within that. So what is the benefit of buying the entire market rather than just individual stocks of your choosing? First is diversification. Instead of buying one company, when you invest in the S&P 500, you buy 500 companies. Meaning, let's say one of those go bust, you are backed up by 499 other companies. Second is performance. Markets like the S&P 500 have always tended to go upwards over time. Yes, there have been occasional dips like the 2008 financial crisis and during COVID. However, since its inception in 1957, it has returned 11.88% year on year. And whilst fancy fund managers will try and persuade to let them invest your money for you, it turns out 90% of people can't beat the market over a 15-year period. That surely tells you everything you need to know. And lastly, it's low fee. Index funds are most popular because they charge you tiny fees to invest into. If someone promised they could beat the market returns by 1%, but we're charging you a 2% fee to do that, you would much rather go to someone like Vanguard that charges you 0.2% and just get the market returns. Cool. Everybody keeping up so far? If you're not, let me know your questions in the comments and I will make sure that I try and get back to as many of them as possible. But let's dive into a question that I would be asking at this point right now, and that is, aren't there loads of risks involved with investing? Everyone and their best mate knows about that person that invested into that stock or that share or that crypto and lost all of their money. Now, I'm not saying that those people weren't telling the truth. Those things happen, markets have crashed before, but what I will share with you is a couple of ways to minimize your risk before you go into invest. Number one is diversification. Now, this is the second time we've spoken about this, but another great example was in 2008, during the financial crisis, a company like BlackRock went under, a very stable company. If you'd invested just in them, you'd have lost all of your cash. If you had invested in the entire market, yes, you might have lost 40 to 50% at its lowest point, but that is still better than having lost everything. Second is about time in the market. Looking again at the financial crash, which started in 2008, the lowest point was actually in 2009, but by 2013, the market had hit a new all-time high compared to previous results from before the financial crash. When it comes to investing and losing money in the stock market, the only way you can actually do it is if you sell at a lower point than you bought in at. If you didn't sell during the 2008 financial crash and held your money because you're investing for the long term, you would have more than doubled your money today. Third is there's always the option to buy lower risk funds. Go on a platform like Vanguard, and they literally share with you the risk level of the funds that they have, whether it's a 6 out of 7, 5 out of 7, 4 out of 7. So if you have a lower risk tolerance, go for one of the lower risk funds. And finally, you could do something called dollar cost averaging, which is a tactic where regardless of what's going on in the market, you invest the same amount every month without any questions asked. And this is a tactic that I follow personally. Now, the benefit of this is when a market crashes, for example, you're still constantly buying as the price begins to drop, which means you're taking advantage of buying shares and stocks at a lower price, essentially on sale. One thing that's notable to also mention is about your attitudes to investing. Let's say you went out and wanted to invest in something like a property that you were going to rent out, and you knew after 25 years the rent would have paid you back what you put in. Now, over those 20 years, you're completely fine with the fact that you might have to go and replace a boiler, you might have to refurbish it a couple of times, you might have to sink more money into it before you make those profits. What I'm trying to say is it wasn't a smooth ride for you to make that money after 20 years. There were points where you had lost more and more money. Well, why treat the stock market any differently? If you're gonna want to grow money, you have to understand that volatility is the price you're willing to pay. If over the long term you're going to gain returns, don't worry about here and there when your money is losing value, because you know the tactic that you've put in and you're confident, like with that property, after 20 years, your money is going to grow. Great, so we've covered why you would invest, what investing is and how it makes you money, about risk tolerance, about shares, about index funds. And the next question you could be asking is, well, is now the right time to actually start investing? The answer is absolutely not. It is not the best time. The best time was actually about 10 years ago. But the second best time is right now. If anyone's ever said to you that you have to have a certain income level or you have to be a certain age to start investing, then those people have been seriously misinformed. The number one consensus amongst people within the personal finance community is that one of the superpowers of investing is investing early and often. Because at the end of the day, time in the market always beats timing the market. But if you're not convinced, let me prove it to you with math. Let's say you were able to invest $100 every month from the age of 18 to the age of 60 with a 10% return, then by the end of that time period, you would have $675,000. Now, let's say someone told you that you needed to be in your mid-30s to start investing. So you started from 35 to 60 and you wanted to make that same amount of money. Well, guess what? You now would need to put in 450 quid every single month. That's 4.5 times more each month by having simply waited till your 30s to start investing. The important thing to consider before you start investing is actually more to do with your financial position. Number one is, do you have high interest debt? Because like interest compounds in your favor when you're investing, it will compound against you when you have debts. So that could be something to pay off before you get into invest. Number two is, do you have an emergency fund? When I invest, I'm locking away my money for the long term. Essentially a place where you have 3 to 6 months of your living expenses stored away that's easily accessible should you ever, in the worst case scenario, lose your job and need that money, because you don't want to be touching your investments. And finally, do you need money in the short term? Do you have a short-term vision to be buying your house in the next 1 to 2 years? The majority consensus says at the very least that money should be locked away in investments for 3 to 5 years. But even then, if you can push that to 10 to 20 years, that is where the true power of investing starts to happen. I only really started getting into investing at the age of 22. And those 4 years that I could have started at 18 are years that I wish I hadn't missed out. The one thing you'll hear from anyone that invests is, I wish I could have started earlier. So now is a great time to be watching this video. And now, finally, the part of this video which you might have already skipped to and which you definitely have been looking forward to the most: how do you actually invest? So the first thing you're gonna need is a website, a broker to actually invest through. And how are you gonna do that? Well, you're gonna go on Google and you're gonna type in best investment platforms UK, USA, Germany. And you're gonna look out for the ones with the best reviews. Me personally, I looked for 3 things on an investment platform. Number one is it had to have index funds that I can invest into, because that was the tactic that I was taking as a beginner. Number 2 is it had to have significantly low fees, because I did not want them eating into my result. And third, there actually wasn't a third. I don't know why I said 3, but that's why I ended up personally investing in a platform like Vanguard. But there's loads in the UK, AJ Bell, Hargreaves Lansdowne, just to name a few. And in the US, Betterment, Wealthify, Public, there are loads of different platforms. So go out there and do the research to find the best one for yourself. The next important step is to whether you're going to open a general investment account or a stocks and shares ISA here in the UK, or a Roth IRA out in the US, but I'm from the UK, so I'm going to talk about stocks and shares ISA. These are tax advantaged accounts where every person in the UK gets a £20,000 a year allowance to go into ISAs. Anything you earn cannot be taxed in it, which means that after 50 years, your £10 million worth of profit that you've earned through investing, I'm just making up numbers here, cannot be taxed when you pull it out, as long as it's come from that £20,000 a year allowance. Then, after you've inserted your details and you waited a couple of days for them to validate everything that you've done, they will accept it and you can start putting in money. Me, myself, I have a direct debit. Whenever I get paid my salary, a chunk of money automatically goes into that investment without me even noticing. For me, I put away 20% each month, but that is a huge amount I've worked hard to get to, so make sure you're going at your own rate. And I would be absolutely lying to you if I wasn't nervous when I started investing. I was checking my phone all the time. The results are up, the results are down. I knew I wouldn't touch it, but these were still things that I was doing and that I know everyone else does when they start investing. However, you grow that muscle over time to accept what's going on and to understand that it's a long-term strategy. And now I check my investment maybe every 2-3 months, but not really because I care what's happening, just more out of interest of how much money is in the account. And there is so much more to talk about when it comes to investing, but hopefully I've given you a really good overview that will put you in a good position to start investing and to start doing your own research into this area. If you do have any questions, drop them in the comments, like I said, and I will try and get back to every single one. Unless this video blows up, but if it doesn't, I can get back to all of them, don't worry. And remember, with investing, your portfolio will most likely go up and down, and that you should always do more of your own research before you start investing. This was just a really general overview to get your brain ticking when it comes to investing. And if you're feeling a little bit nosy right now, then perhaps maybe watch this video where I break down everything that I've earned through short form content creation since I started doing it. Enjoy.